All right, and we're on. Hey, hi, Antonis. Hi, Will.
Hello, Pari.
Hi,
Hello,
Paris.
Will.
Hi,
And
Antonis.
thank you very much for being here with us, Will.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. And let's get started. Just a quick intro on our side as well, because this is the first episode of us doing this. This is the State of Progress podcast. It's a tech podcast from our company, Logic. With Antonis, we're running a company which is a web development and DevOps consultancy firm. And we would like to do this thing, get interesting people on camera and discuss about technology, entrepreneurship, open source, software development, all that nice stuff. So, Antonis, maybe you have to add something to that, and then you can do a quick intro about yourself as well.
I think I'll pass it on to Will to start off. I think Paris, you did a very good intro there. So, Will, thanks again for being here. So, I have too many things, and a few of those that you said were not as widespread that you have used with Paris in the past from the projects that you have built. But I would like to hear it from you and hear your story in brief up to now.
Sure. So I'm a software developer. I've been working for 30 years in a variety of fields, but definitely the last 10, maybe even 20 years, been working in Python, and I've written a number of open source projects. My most one that I'm well known for is Rich, which is a terminal formatting library. And I used that to found Textualize, which is a company that makes terminal applications or provides toolkits to make terminal applications that other developers can use.
Wow. So this was when I saw that you. So first of all, I will do a quick intro and also say that we know your work for I think 10 years or more, because in our first startup with Antonis, which is Sourceler and Online ID, we would use the Pi file system library to do isolated file system operations on that Online ID that we had built at the moment. So we have been following you since then. You do interesting work. And another thing we did in that company was a library called Xterm.js, which is essentially it's essentially the terminal emulator for Visual Studio Code and pretty much almost every web application, web technology-based application that uses some sort of a terminal emulator. It went great, but we never thought that this could be, viable part of a company around terminals, because who cares about terminals? So when we saw what you were doing, I thought, okay, I guess we were wrong. So share more, if you'd like, about why you worked with terminals and what does that mean for a company?
Terminals are a very interesting part of computing history, because they've been around for decades. Literally, my grandfather's time is when the protocol for terminals was created. And as developers, we all use terminals. But for many, many years, the output we get from terminals, is terrible. You get like a stream of monochrome text. It's not formatted. There's no color. It's hard to read. You have to be very skilled in reading terminal output. And, as a developer, I was annoyed by this, because I used to work in the web and in the terminal. In the web world, you've got fantastic, consoles and debug output. But then when you go into the terminal and you do back-end stuff, you get this really horrendous black and white text, which is hard to read. So I set about creating a library which did nicer terminal formatting. Simple stuff. Started out just adding some color, so you could colorize a word to draw attention to it, or use bold or underline. Then I did formatting. Text wrapping was an important one. Previously in terminal, if you write text, it'll get wrapped by the character, and it will chop a word off at the end, and then you get half a word at the beginning, and it's difficult to read. So I wrote text wrapping. So all you have to do is print some text, and it wraps the text neatly and makes it look like text was designed for human beings. And before that, I was not a terminal expert by any means. I literally had to go to Wikipedia to figure out how you do the control codes. But still, I built up all this knowledge and built a library, which is quite comprehensive. There was lots of little libraries out there in the Python world to do these kind of things, but they didn't work together. So you could have a table and, a library that did tables but you didn't word wrap inside it. And you couldn't mix components together. But Rich created a protocol, where you could compose things. So you can put syntax highlighted text inside a table and put it inside a panel and do all sorts of kind of operations on it. And it's very easy for a developer who's got some data and they want to present it to the user. They can do that in a few lines, and it's reliable across platforms. And it could have ended there. It was getting a lot of popularity, and I was delighted. And people said, well, I want to do more. I want, rather than just nicely formatted output, I want to have more dynamic output so I can interact with my apps inside the terminal, and I can build applications. And I resisted it for the longest time because I didn't want to give up my spare time again. But I saw people taking Rich and building applications on top of it, just being very ingenious and combining it with libraries to take the input and mouse and add it together with rich output. And it created applications which were surprisingly good, which I've never seen in the terminal before. They looked a bit more like web applications. And I realized that I have to do this justice. I have to take Rich and build an application framework on top of it. These kind of things have existed. These terminal apps, interactive terminal apps, have existed for decades, all the way back to the 90s. But they had a reputation of being very hard to use. You had to be very motivated if you wanted to learn the API and build something on top of that. And people were still building these apps, which is the crazy thing. It's not like the browser came along and everybody realized, this is much better. We don't need to look at the terminal anymore. We can just work in the browser. That never happened. People are still building before, I came along. People were still building these terminal apps more than ever. But it was not something which was catered for. And I felt like there was a gap there. People wanted this. No one was providing it. And maybe I could, fill that gap, create a market, and create an ecosystem. And that seems to have been what we've done. I created a library called Textual, which takes some of the best of web development techniques, because all the interest in user interfaces has come from the web world. So all the developments have come from there. None of those developments have made it back into terminal. So I thought I'll take some of the techniques that people have built over the last 2 decades from the web world and see if I can port some of them to terminal world. And that's how Textual came about. So Textual is like web development, but it's a much more stripped back, bare bones web development, much easier to use. And people can actually build sophisticated applications there. So that's how I got to today, and that's what I'm working on at the moment.
All right. So what's one thing that most people didn't know that terminals can do, and they can?
Oh, it's quite a lot. People were very surprised that terminals can do mouse. I think because the terminal and the keyboard is such a natural fit. They thought that just doesn't work with a mouse, but there's been a mouse protocol in terminals for a long, long time. Some apps which work with a mouse, people don't realize, like HTOP, that tool that shows you what your CPUs are doing. You can actually click around with a mouse and that will change things. But people didn't know. So that was quite a big one. People were surprised. People that worked with terminals for their entire career had no idea that it could do mouse support.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those magic moments. At least it was for me as a developer. The first time that you see the escape codes that change the color or the formatting of the text. So you say, okay, now I can do bold, I can do other things, and then you have to remember, what is this color and then this typeface. So I suppose that's a huge thing when it comes to that, because if you have a library that does it for you, it's always easier. I mean, it always helps.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to use any libraries that I've created. You can actually write bold text and green text, underlined text using these escape sequences. But they're a bit cryptic. The documentation for them is hard to find. And also, if you start inserting escape sequences into your text, it becomes very difficult to format that text even more. If you imagine you want to center a bit of text, but one of the words is in bold and it's got an escape sequence before the word and after the word, you try to center that, but then you've got invisible characters. You take that into account when you center it and you end up with it's not aligned properly. So I think that's why these things didn't take off, because of all these technical difficulties of building, it's very, very simple stuff that you take for granted in HTML. So I think that's why people don't use the escape sequences directly, but it is fascinating. The protocol is fascinating to me because if you use a terminal on your desktop, you might call it the terminal, sometimes the console, but they're actually terminal emulators. And you wonder, well, what are they emulating? And they're emulating devices which are decades old, from multiple different manufacturers, and they're basically a keyboard with a screen, and they basically send control codes over a wire, and control codes come back and they display it on the screen, and that is a terminal. And in fact, that's actually a more recent terminal, because the older terminals, you had a keyboard and a printer. They worked in kind of the same way. You typed things and it printed something out, and then escape sequence came over the wire, and then it printed that out again so you could see the response. And it's crazy because it's from multiple different manufacturers over the years, and protocols have emerged almost organically. It's not like as far as I know, there's no ISO for terminal escape sequences. There's kind of like pseudo standards that have emerged, but a lot of information is all over the place. You kind of like pull it from various sources. It's kind of like it's almost like archaeology than computing. It's not like there's no book, there's no website for standards. It is something that you kind of investigate and experiment with, and I guess that's why it appealed to me, because I was kind of not just like copying code, I was like investigating and discovering, which is as close as I get to like being an archaeologist.
I think we've dug very, very, very deep when we were trying to implement anti-escape sequences in XMJS, and I think the protocol you're talking about essentially is VD100. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was
terminal emulator.
Yeah, that is one terminal, but there's lots. That is part of the protocol, but there's layers on top of it as well. And not every terminal emulator supports all the same escape sequences, which is why it's such a headache.
Yeah. So I think there's a page where there's quite a lot of documentation about the VD100 protocol, but again, not everything is clear also. There are many parts where you have to take a decision about how you're going to implement something and how this is going to be displayed to the user. I remember that because there was, I think, Mitchell Hashimoto, the person, who created Terraform and, HasCorp and all those nice tools. Now he's building a terminal emulator, I think.
Yeah,
and
post TTY.
yeah, exactly. And we had a very brief discussion on Twitter with Mitchell and with Daniel Eames from Microsoft, which is the person that's running Extreme.js something until right now, since I left the project. And they were discussing exactly that, how it's not always deterministic how this protocol is going to be implemented. But I also had another question for you, that now that you're doing all that stuff, I'm not sure if we made that clear, but both Rich and Textual are Python libraries. And
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So is Python good for command line tools, or is it slow? Or how do you see that?
I think Python is great for command line tools. There's lots of libraries out there which do the things you need. Performance most often doesn't come into it because a modern computer can parse a command line, very quickly, even in the slowest language. Performance does come into it for some of the things that we have worked on in Textual, because we've got, imagine a modern website. It's got lots of divs, basically components, and it's got to track the position of these components. It's going to wrap the text. When you do that kind of stuff in the terminal, you face the same kind of problems. You have to do quite a lot of work in order to get a nicely formatted screen inside the terminal. And performance was an issue right at the start. When we did it naively, it was slow. It was usable slow, but it wasn't a good experience. If you come from the web, you would think, oh, this is terrible. I don't want to continue to use it. But we started optimizing, basically taking what we've got, using various techniques to make it go faster, all in pure Python. We got it fast enough. In fact, we got it more than fast enough. Our kind of like baseline test is a Raspberry Pi. It's a very small single board computer, and Textual runs very smoothly on that. And there's no C code being run there other than the Python interpreter itself. So I think when you that's a very niche case. Not many people are going to build terminal application frameworks. At least I hope not. But I think for the majority of things that people use in the terminal, you don't need to worry about optimization. It's Python's more than fast enough.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I would be more interested to learn if he also handled packaging applications, because I understand that what the Textual is doing is more the rendering and UI and interaction with the user. But do you help people also package their applications? Because this been an issue for other CLIs or terminal interfaces.
Yeah, do you mean for distribution?
Yeah, because that's a big issue, because Python is amazing. It's just a bunch of files. You can install things with pip or your favorite installer, but this means that you already need to have Python installed.
Yeah. So you're right. I mean, you can distribute a Textual app as a Python package, but then in order to give that to someone, they need to understand Python packaging. We don't have like a solution for that. But we're kind of relying on the Python community. There are various tools which can take your Python code, bundle it up into a binary, and then you can ship that binary. So it runs quite well with PyInstaller, which it bundles things. People have used Nutica. Is it Nutica? It turns your Python code into C++, and then compiles that, and then you can distribute an executable. But we're kind of relying on the community for that kind of thing. One more, UV has recently added support to make executable scripts. So you just need to write a command line, and you embed the dependencies inside the file itself, and that's making it much easier for people to send scripts to other people. So that's kind of community solutions. What we've worked on, though, is something which takes a Textual app and turns it into a web application. So we got technology called Textual Web, which does just that. So you have your app, and then with a single command line, it creates a web server, and then you can go to visit in a web browser, and you get exactly the same application, same kind of experience. And that's using xterm.js to render the app. So that's the angle that we're taking. But I'm also very keen to help people with the packaging, because the more people can make and share terminal-based apps, the better it is for me and for everyone. You want when you build a thing, it's highly unlikely it's just for your own use. If it's useful to you, chances are it's useful to other people, and its utility is magnified by the number of people that you can send it to. So this is a sort of very something that we really like to focus on.
And this is exactly what I was about to ask you next, which is, what were your thoughts before starting the company? Am I going to start a company around terminal applications and create products? Or is it a services-based company to help people build terminal applications? Or both? But what was your thought around that?
It's a bit of both. So what we do comes under the umbrella of open core. So the idea is you build a library, and you build a community around that library, and you get people using it, which is great. People will use it, and then they'll take it into the job, and they use it there. And then you build a service which can run alongside that library, which you can charge for. There's a bit of conflict whenever you do that, because, well, obviously, if you're going to hire people, you need money. You need to take usually venture capital money, and that can conflict with the nature of open source. Open source is weird in that it's not compatible with capitalism very well. You make a product and you'd give it away to people for free. And if you're like 100% capitalist mindset, this is going to be like, I don't get this. But I think if you can have something where allows you to build a software, give it away for free, and then also build a dependent service which you can sell to companies, then you get the best of both worlds. You can create an income, and you can create software and distribute that to your fellow developers. And some people have done it very well. Some people have done it badly. It depends on the stage you're at. I think when companies get really big, sometimes they make missteps. Put it lightly, that they will change the license, that kind of thing, and you can burn down all the goodwill that you created when you built some software for other people. So I think it can be done, but it is tricky to navigate that kind of thing.
I think where you draw the line between what's a premium feature or what's something that makes more sense to be offered as a service, and what's something that should be part of the core of the open core, which is the library.
So for what we do, there's a very clear delineation between the open source part and the service. The service that we're building takes nothing away from the open source part. So there's no premium feature. There's no widgets which we're selling. The service we're selling is basically turn your textual app into a web app. But that doesn't stop anyone from using textual in the way that you'd use any other application library. You still have all the features, and you can send it to other people, and they can use it as in any way they wish. But not all open core companies have that. Sometimes there is a bit of overlap where they do have premium features, or the desire to create a business out of something means that they have to hold something back from the open source part. What we do, we're quite fortunate, and it just kind of just kind of came about that way. And there is like, we don't need to hold anything back from the open source. You get everything. It's all there. It's open. You can look at it. The only thing that we're going to charge for in the future is, do you want to turn this into a web application and serve it to your users and customers? And that's the bit that we charge for.
Yeah, makes total sense. And if you reach the point where what you do for the community and what you do for the business is orthogonal, so the one does not interfere directly with the other, but uses the other to get more supercharged, because I suppose that having paid customers helps improving the library, and then having more community means that the business part is also solidified. So that's I would say a very good tango there in between the two.
Yeah, it's a nice relationship, and the open source side of it also serves as advertising. Because if you're building up a community by giving people what they want to work with, they will start using that, and they will take it into their company. They've got a problem at their job, and they think, "Oh, I'll write a textual app to solve this," and then the managers see it, and then management sees it, and then it filters out that way. So it's like there's no competition there. It's like we do lots, we do what we can for the open source, and try to enable this kind of organic growth, which gets it into the hands of the people that are, have got large organizations with checkbooks that they can eventually, pay for our services.
What's very interesting to me, and actually leads to my next question, is what's the kind of applications that you see people willing to put on the web? Because usually terminal applications are things that I use with my own computer, on my, it's mostly around what I do locally in my machine, and maybe interfacing with web service, but again, through my own account. So can you describe how the opposite works?
So there's the kind of like just web application use case. Anything that you might want a web application to do. If you can do it in a textual app, you might want to serve it on the web. So that can be like, a to-do app, a fitness tracker, anything. But I think the most compelling use case, which web apps don't solve, is the ability to run your app anywhere. With textual web, there's a intermediate server involved, which means that you can run a textual web app without configuring a web server. So you don't need, it can get past firewalls, and it can run anywhere. And you can have like a fleet of these applications being served on devices which are not large. They're just whatever they happen to be, like digital signage, in the stores where you get like a screen that's got like a small computer backed onto it. You can install like a textual web on there, and that means that you can have an interface which is served from a particular device, and then you can connect to that just one device. So it's not the type of application that you would just browse into on the web typically. You're not clicking around. You're unlikely to land on a textual web. It's more for kind of internal use cases, where a web app would be hard to run or almost impossible to run. So there's a whole load of like potential use cases which web apps don't cater for, and that's what we're that's the slice of the market that we're going for. Interestingly, it's like we're also creating the market. We're tending to create the market as well as like providing a service for that market. We're kind of like growing the pie, because people will be able to do things with textual web that they couldn't realize with regular web applications that needed to have lots of memory and needed to be configured so they can have outgoing HTTP ports and all the other architecture involved. They can do it much easier with a very straightforward textual app that they don't need front end skills to do. You don't need to understand JavaScript. You don't need to understand the security involved. You don't need multiple professionals to do it. You guys are imagine you've had a lot of experience with the web, and you probably know that it takes, there's quite a lot of skill sets involved in building a web application. But the text lab, you just need to have Python skills, and that's it. So you can basically build applications which would just not get built before, but you can with like a straightforward Python API.
So pretty much a good let's say persona or a good profile of a textual customer is a person who is a Python developer and wants to create an application that will be used also by people who do not always use a terminal. So I do know Python, and I can create a program that works either in the terminal, but also works in the browser as well, because of the service that you're providing.
Yeah. That's it. So, we're probably very familiar with working with the terminal, but most people outside of tech, and maybe, sort of related fields will not know there's a terminal on the computer, even though every desktop computer has had a terminal for the last 20 years. Lots of technical people, lots of non-technical people will not know how to open that terminal. So turning it into a web application just means that now you can build an app for yourself and for other developers, and also just for regular people, non-nerds. With Texel, you can sit someone who's non-technical in front of it, and they will see scroll bars, buttons, links, tables, things, and they will be able to use it straight away. They might think, oh, this application has a kind of a retro look to it in the way that it's got like a grid of characters, but they'll be very comfortable with it. And that's the great thing, because otherwise you're building software just for this one silo, and it would never get outside of that silo. It's just purely for other quite technical people, and software is at its best where everyone has access to it. So that is like an important thing that we concentrate on.
So in this service that you've implemented, are you taking care also of hosting the application sometimes on your servers, or are you taking care of distributing the application on the servers of the customers? What's the workflow of that service?
We don't have hosting at the moment. We might have that in the future. But the benefits of being able to install these apps wherever you want means that you can run them on devices where you couldn't install other applications. So let's say you've got a shop floor. It's got a bunch of equipment like industrial lace, or it could be in a laboratory. It's got lots of high-tech equipment for analyzing proteins. Those devices will typically be connected to a computer. It'll be a older computer, typically, maybe running at XP or something. But those are not connected devices. It means in order to operate them, you've got to go to the shop floor or laboratory, sit down in front of it, find the software and work with it there. But if you have a textual web app, that means you can install it on all those devices. And then immediately you can administer it remotely from anywhere. So it can make any device a connected device without having to worry about routers and firewalls, etc.
I think that now that you mentioned the Windows, I would like to go back to the actual library because we're discussing a lot of the issues between terminal emulators, and but there is no like gold standard for them. But if you go even further and you try to do this cross-platform, then you have to deal with Linux and macOS, which is sometimes close, but not very close. And then you have Windows, and then you have WSL, and then you have, all these different places you find terminals. So I suppose that one solution would be to use something like the web interface, because this should work in the same way everywhere you go. But how do you make the underlying library work with terminal applications everywhere?
So the world of operating systems for the terminal is split into two. On one side, you have Linux, macOS, or anything that's based on Linux. On the other side, you have Windows. And if you write software for Linux and Mac OS, it's not that hard because they work in very similar ways. It'll just run. They also had lots of options with regards to terminal emulators, and it means that most people had a good experience. They didn't have to work too hard. But in the past, Windows was a huge headache. They did things quite differently, and the terminal that comes installed on older Windows machines was not very capable. It didn't use the same kind of mechanisms that Linux did. You know, these escape sequences we've been talking about, it didn't support them. It was much more limited in terms of features. You had less colors. You could do less with it. So that was a problem. But in the early days, we figured, well, we're just going to have to support Linux and Mac and say, sorry, Windows, which we didn't want to do because Windows developers are still like, I think half of tech developers out there. But fortunately for us, Microsoft decided to rebuild the terminals. They made Windows Terminal. This is a few years ago now, and that is now very, very capable. It's on par with the Windows terminals. It's fast and it supports color, and the output is very, very similar. You can switch it into a mode which says operate like a Linux terminal, like it can handle the escape sequences. So we don't have to do much. A little bit. We have to sometimes we have to sniff the operating system and do either some Linux or Mac code or some Windows code. But in general, the code is the same. So that means that on all the major platforms, the textual apps will run, pretty damn well. Which is fantastic because I hate when computing is restricted to whoever purchased one particular device. I think I hate that. I think computing should be for everyone, and operating system manufacturers should cater for everyone.
At least this was the promise of the web when it started getting, more and more popular as an application, as a target for applications. So I had another question on another note is that is your team located with you, or are you working remotely? How do you do that?
We're here in Edinburgh. We're a smaller team now. Previously, we had a few more people, and we had one developer who worked in Portugal. But we always wanted to have a core team plus satellite workers. I think that can work very well. I mean, both can work well. But I think it's also productive to have developers sitting next to each other and having spontaneous conversations to, figure things out. Certainly in the early days, I think that creativity comes from having people next to each other. But if you have remote developers who are smart, it's crazy not to hire them if you can. So I think if we go bigger, it would be that kind of same model. It would be a local core team plus satellite developers. And it's not too hard to manage with today's technology. You can jump on a stand-up and have a video call, just as we're doing at the moment, or you can do it quite spontaneously. So I think it can work very well remotely.
So we have an office at downtown Athens, but we don't always work from there. We're basically a remote company, but what you talked about, the ability to do spontaneous discussions, especially when you're starting something new, not particularly in the start of a company. I think at the start of every project where everything is still in flux is quite important. But how do you manage, or how do you think should be managed when you have some people working on site together, but you have some other people working distributed? How do you think about that?
You do have to pick the right tasks. If someone's working remotely, there's a kind of resistance to well, it's not, I wouldn't say resistance, just it's tricky to just turn around and talk to someone about that task. So you have to give them a task which is fairly self-contained, in that everything is there for them and they can work independently. And some developers are very good at that. And if, for people working remotely, you have to find those particular developers. But also they should be able to, they should have the wisdom to know when they need to talk to the core team. Because it's great to be independent, but it's also great to know when you need to have a conversation and get more detail. So it takes both. It takes the lead, the tech lead, and the remote developer. They both have to be in tune and know when to carry on with what they got, or call in and discuss things. But if you find the right people, I think that can work very well. I mean, I worked remotely for a long time. I think it was prior to starting Textualize, I was working remotely for 11 years. And I was in the same city as my employer. So I could meet him every few weeks as necessary. But generally, you've got the work, the task, and you can just get on with it.
Okay. And a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you mentioned something about UV, this new Python packaging, let's say toolset.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked with it? I haven't been played with it, to be honest. Maybe Adonis has, but it's getting quite a hype right now.
It is. I've played with it a little bit, and it works very well. And it is fast. Part of that is because it's written in Rust. But part of that, I think, is just they've done sort of clever things regards caching. But basically it works quite smoothly. And it feels like they're trying to be a one-stop solution. Previously, with packaging and all that kind of thing, you generally need to know a few technologies. And Astral, who's the company behind UV, are trying to be, they're trying to just basically do everything, which is a good thing, actually, because it's been enormous headache, just packaging your library and distributing it. There doesn't seem to be like a perfect solution. So UV have come along and they're attempting to be that perfect solution. And some people might think, well, you're taking away choice. I can understand that point of view. But I don't want to have to choose for some things. I want the best thing. I want a solution which works reliably all of the time. So I think UV. I think the CEO of Astral, Charlie Marsh. I think I support him in his goals of creating like a solution to all these things. And if that feeds back into standards, I think it's a good thing. And I'm looking forward to the day when Python packaging is a non-issue. No one argues about it. They just know what to do. So I think it's a good thing.
I think that recently, with all these peps around, standardization of how do you declare your dependencies, how do you build your packages, your by-project.toml file, all those things have done great lengths into standardizing the way that you package Python applications. So we can only hope that this is going to continue, but indeed having a language provided way of doing all of the dependency things should be an ideal goal for us, Python developers.
Yeah. I think so. I think it's all moving in the right direction. It's been a long time coming. I was hoping that someone will just make decisions. I think that's the deficiency of open source. Open source can be fantastic in many ways. But when it comes to standards, someone has to just do it, stop arguing about it and just do it and put it in the hands of other people. And then that's how standards come about. You don't you don't wait for standards. You don't wait for some body to academically come up with a standard and write it. You do stuff and that becomes a standard in the future. And I think that's where funded companies have to come in. Someone has to just do the stuff. They still have to convince all the developers this is the best way forward. If they produce something which isn't great, which doesn't satisfy their needs, then having all the money in the world won't be enough to force a standard on anyone else. But they have to have that push to present a standard and get that through the process and to a point where everyone benefits from it.
That's definitely the way to go. And discussing things is always slower than doing things and then seeing if it works or not. So, we can only hope for that. And I'm very positive that we're going to see great results in the future. I mean, remembering how we did things 10 years ago in our previous company with requirements.txt and then trying to ping versions and all those things. And where we are today, we've been, it's like night and day between the two. So
yeah. Setup Pi was madness. It worked, but running code to do that kind of thing, it has to be declarative. You want to write it down in a declarative manner and say, this is the dependencies, this is how everything fits together. And then have software interpret that. You don't want to have to write code to do the packaging. Things are improving at a really dramatic rate now, which is fantastic. But they have been improving for a long time because we're all in it. We all have this shared goal of making things streamlined and making it easy to distribute our software.
I would like to go back and ask kind of a different question. So you said that you've started with open source, more like a hobby or, a side job. And then this is your day to day and you've built a company around it. So there are many people that are loving open source software and they're trying to contribute either to create a new library or to contributions elsewhere. How would you approach this if it was if you were back at the beginning? So what would you say to some person that's willing to crack into the open source world?
I guess I started out just by building stuff, just out of intellectual curiosity, and also in the early days just building up my skills as a developer. And if you got something that's worth showing off, if it's useful to you, put it out there, see what happens. You do have to promote your work a little bit. Some people are quite disappointed because they build something that's really cool. They put it on a GitHub repo. And then a month later, they haven't got any more stars. They haven't got any issues. No one's using it because no one knows about it. And I think the development which has helped my career along was Twitter. Of all things, just the fact that you could, whilst you're working, just show what you're working on, show your failures and successes. And I think that still works today. Don't know if you want to choose Twitter or Mastodon or whatever, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever. But you need some way, some medium of telling people what you're working on so that they can follow along. They'll try your software. And if you come up with a good project, it'll snowball. Eventually you'll find that, you get your first 100 stars, you'll be delighted, and you get 1,000 stars and then 10,000 stars. And it can go from there. And even if it's not a commercial thing, even if the, venture capital people are not knocking down your door, it can give you, a lot of experience building software and a name for yourself in a community. That's what happened with Rich, basically. I wrote Rich, partially to solve my own problems and partially out of intellectual curiosity. And it kind of snowballed from there. So it's not going to happen overnight, but if you build software and then you share your trials and tribulations with other people, then they will get invested and they'll start using your software, and only good things can happen from there.
Sounds like a plan. And then when it comes to the company, do you believe that like every open source software can be converted into a company? Is it something that happens organically, or something that you can pursue somehow?
I would say, unfortunately, not. Not all open source software can become a company. Even successful open source projects, they can't all become companies. Like Rich. Rich is phenomenally successful. It surpassed 1.5 billion downloads recently, which is a lot. But there's no way to monetize that. There's nothing I could do to turn it into a business, and there's no way to convince venture capital that there's a business behind it. So even something phenomenally successful doesn't always turn into a company. However, if something is successful, that might be an indication. It might be a signal. There is a market somewhere there. A lot of open core companies will build some software and then offer a hosting solution. That seems to be a kind of a common thing. So if you've got something which works on the web, you can like build that and then sell a hosting solution or some other kind of service, even consulting, or if it's a browser or a database or something. There'll be big companies which want you to support that and make add-ons. So there's often potential. And if you can find that, then that's fantastic. But there's no guarantee, I'm afraid. The popularity of your open source project won't guarantee a business. Although, the opposite can be true. You can have an open source project which has 1,000 stars or less. And there's a handful of companies where this software is just critical for their business, and they will pay you handsomely to run it and make changes. So yeah, it's not it's not a clear answer. It just depends very heavily on what you build.
I had a question on that topic of how you communicate your work. So definitely success does not come because you create a GitHub. I mean, success, let's say popularity doesn't come just because you create some good software. You definitely need to communicate that. And I think the same is true for companies. In order for people to learn what you're doing and understand what this company is doing, you should communicate your work. You told that the main vessel for you is Twitter, but I would like to ask you if you have any particular strategy for your open source projects and company. And what I mean by that is, do you have maybe a schedule that I'm going to post every day something, or whatever comes to your mind, you just post it, or do you have to polish it first? How do you approach communicating your work?
So I started doing this long before it became a business. I was doing it for fun. And the thing about software development is it can be a very a lonely activity, because more often than not, you're sitting down at your own desk with no one around hammering away at code. So Twitter was like an outlet for me. The fact that I could post an image of what I'm working on, because most of my stuff is quite visual, so I could take a screenshot or a video and post it. So it was very organic that way, and it kind of built up an audience there. I also posted to our Python, whenever I had like a new release, and that built up an audience there. And I've kind of extended that. I kind of just carry on doing that, even with the business kind of stuff. I have a Textualize Twitter handle, which I rarely use. I use that for notifications. It's mostly just my own personal handle, and I just post stuff as it comes up, as it comes to my head. Sometimes it's interesting people, sometimes it's not. On top of that, I do try and have a more formal strategy. When we have something big to announce, we'll put something together, a blog post, we'll try to get that on Hacker News, or our Python, and we'll try to just distribute it on the socials. But by and large, it's just a very organic thing. It's just me. Something comes to my head that I think is either interesting or funny, then I'll post it. And some people will retweet it, and occasionally it'll go sort of pseudo viral. So yeah, and it's fun for me, and it does actually promote what I work on. So it's it's pretty good.
So you just do it. You don't overthink it.
I don't overthink it. No. It's fun. One thing I would say though is, people will turn off if it feels like they're being sold. If it's like an ad, they'll just psychologically, kind of like overlook it. They'll say, oh, because you're constantly being sold stuff on the internet, and they won't like it. So, if you're self-deprecating, and you post failures, like I used to post, like, when something went wrong and with the terminal stuff, I can post like a screenshot of like garbage on the screen or something, and then we can all laugh at it. That is equally as important. You don't want a stream of ads. I think a lot of companies do take that angle. Every post from them feels like an ad. It feels like they're selling you something. And I think that can backfire, especially for open source developers. What you want to do is reach other people like yourself, other people who are in tech, who love the technology, and that's what they're there for. They're not there to be sold stuff. They're there to be entertained, either by something being funny or something being interesting. So that's my strategy so far, anyway.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. What I really want from the content that I read or view on the internet is being genuine. So I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay to say an ad. I mean, like, hey, this is a product, buy it. I'm okay with that because it's straightforward, genuine. But when I see posts that seem like they're community oriented, but you can sense that there's something underlying that's not exactly like that. Something's off. Yeah. That's not
you
good.
could kind of tell that the person that wrote it.
This is cringing.
Is not authentic. That they're just there to sell you something. And I pick up on that very easily. And the same thing, but when you do longer form posts, like when you post on Hacker News, Hacker News has a reputation of the readers being very tough on anyone. And if you're like of an open source company, like an open core company like we are, and you post something that's very much like an ad, they will tear into you. Like it's awful. It's like a pack of hyenas, you know. So you have to be self-deprecating. You have to be genuine. If they think that you're a techie or a developer like themselves, they will interact with you in that same manner, and things are likely to go more smoothly.
All right. So, Andarius, I'm not sure if you have any other question, but if you would like, we can start wrapping this up.
I think it's a very good note. Don't try to sell things, and be genuine, and then this will get you a long way. That's what the gist of what I'm holding from the last part of the conversation.
Exactly.
I really love it.
Don't be a shill. No one likes shills.
Yeah. Let's use that to start wrapping up. So what I would like to do at this point is ask Reid to say, I mean, I suppose Twitter is one of the ways people should try and find you. Where should people find you or your company? And, you know, what are the socials that are more interesting?
There's Twitter. My handle is Will McGugan, obviously, or there's the Textualized handle. I spend a lot of time on our Discord server. We have a Discord server for Textualized and rich stuff. And if anyone wants to talk to me, it doesn't even have to be about tech. Although that's probably the only thing I really know about. They're welcome to join our Discord server. I'm also on Mastodon. I can't even remember my handle, but you can find me there. And I do like interacting with the community. I think it's been always very productive, and I enjoy it. So yeah, feel free to get in touch.
Sounds correct. So yeah, we will also make sure to have the links in the description for all those places. And yeah, once again, thanks a lot, Will, for being here with us. And it's been a pretty good conversation for us, at least. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.